Shri Bhakti Srila Prabhupada ki. ISKCON founder Acharya, BBT founder Acharya, Jagat Guru, Savior of the whole world, Patit Pavan Srila Prabhupada ki. Shri Shri Radha Madhava, Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki. Anant Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. ISKCON Bhakta Vrinda ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Sri Lilamrta, Sri Prabhupada Lilamrta, Volume 1 by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Where do I start? Okay. Gita-Upanishad by Abhay Charande. Umajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Asyatya Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Bhavu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Samaham Mande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. There were also 4 shorter essays by other contributors, including Bhakti Saranga Goswami. An advertisement on the back cover highlighted Gita-Upanishad by Abhay Charande, editor and founder, Back to Godhead, in 3 parts, 1200 pages, royal size, first class Morocco binding. An elaborate exposition of the world's famous Hindu philosophy, the Bhagavad Gita, in its true scientific theistic interpretations by the chain of disciplic succession from Sri Krishna. Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhva, Madhavendra, Puri, Ishvara, Lord Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Krishnadas, Narottama, Vishwanath, Baladeva, Jagannath, Thakur, Bhakti Vinod, Gaur Kishore Das, Thakur, Siddhanta Saraswati, down to the author, with numerous illustrations in color and plain from many authentic scriptures, to be published shortly. Customers booked in advance, price in India rupees 18, foreign £1 10 shillings. And a second major work, Lord Chaitanya, in 2 parts, totaling 1000 pages. Neither of these manuscripts was actually near completion, but Abhay was expressing his eagerness to undertake such large works on behalf of his spiritual master. In attempting to print the second issue of the Back to Godhead, Abhay encountered the same difficulty as before. Twice he requested permission to purchase newsprint, and twice the government denied his request. Paper was restricted on account of war. On July 10th, 1944, Abhay wrote a third letter. With due respect, I beg to submit that under the instructions of His Divine Grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, the spiritual head of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, I had to start a paper under the caption, Back to Godhead. The very name will suggest that the intention of starting such a paper in the midst of heavy turmoil through which the world is now passing. A copy of the same booklet is sent herewith for your kind perusal. In that booklet you shall find strong world opinions, even by many reputed politicians all over the world, in favor of such a movement to bring back the world into sanity by training the mind and educating the human nature for unshaking spiritual considered to be the supreme need of mankind. I hope you will kindly go through the paper by making some time, and I may draw your attention especially to the introductory portion. Abhay also remarked that the editorial board of Back to Godhead felt that there was not so much scarcity of paper as there was scarcity of education. Taking the opportunity to preach, Abhay explained that although the ultimate supplier was the personality of Godhead, godless men consider themselves the proprietors of all things. Catastrophe that is now in vogue in present war of supremacy is guided by this false sense of proprietorship, and therefore there is a need of making propaganda amongst all human beings in order to bring them back to the sense of the ultimate proprietorship of Godhead. Abhay considered that there might indeed be a paper shortage in India, but in ancient times, he wrote, enlightened Indians had regularly sacrificed tons of valuable ghee and grains in fire during religious sacrifices, and in those times there had not been any scarcity. People now, however, having abandoned all sacrifices to the Supreme Lord, were producing only scarcity. People now, however, having abandoned all sacrifices to the Supreme Lord, were producing only scarcity. Quote, can we not therefore sacrifice a few reams of paper in the midst of many wastages for the same purpose in order to derive greater benefit for humankind? I request that the government should take up this particular case in the light of spiritualism, which is not within the material calculation. Even in Great Britain, the government has immensely supported a similar movement called the moral rearmament movement, without consideration of the scarcity of paper, which is more acute there than here. Let there be a page, if only if not more, for publication of the Back to Godhead, for which we do not mind, but my earnest request is that the government should at least let there be a ventilation of atmosphere for which my paper Back to Godhead is meant. Kindly therefore give it a serious consideration and allow me to start even by one page every weekly or monthly as you think best, without thinking it is ordinary waste of paper, for the sake of humanity and Godhead. Unquote. The letter was successful. Now, with a veiled sarcasm, he headlined his second issue, thanks to the Government of India. He informed his readers, many of whom had been disappointed to learn that the government had curtailed his printing, that he would be able to continue his magazine every month. Abhay printed his letter to the government paper officer and also the reply granting him permission. His articles were shorter, this time displaying the flair of a news columnist. As with the philosophical criticism, verve, and a touch of ironic humor, he commented on the world leaders' crisis, Gandhi Jinnah talks, Mr. Churchill's humane world, Mr. Bernard Shaw's wishful dream, spontaneous love of Godhead comprise the issue. Gandhi Jinnah talks. We are sorry to learn that Gandhi Jinnah talks about the unity of Indian people have failed for the present. Abhay was not very optimistic about the results of such occasional talks between several heads of communities. Even if they made a successful solution, it would break up and take the shape of another problem. They were looking for unity between Hindus and Muslims, but in Europe, the fighting parties were Christians. And in Asia, they were mostly Buddhists, but still they were fighting. So fighting will go on between Hindu and Mohammedan, between Hindu and Hindus, or between Mohammedan and Mohammedan, between Christians and Christians, and between Buddhist and Buddhist, till the day of annihilation. As long as there was the contaminated self-interest of sense gratification, there would be fighting between brother and brother, father and son, nation and nation. Real unity would stand only on the plane of transcendental service to the Supreme. Mahatma Gandhi, Abhay wrote, is far above ordinary human being, and we have all respects for him. But Abhay advised Gandhi to give up his activities on the mental plane and rise to the transcendental plane of the spirit. Then there would be talks about the unity of all people. Abhay cited Bhagavad Gita's definition of a Mahatma, one who concentrates his attention on the service of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. He requested Mahatma Gandhi to adhere to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and preach its message of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. In this way, Mahatma Gandhi, through his influential position in the world, could bring about universal relief simply by preaching the message of Bhagavad Gita. Mr. Churchill's humane world, Prabhupada wrote, we are pleased to find that the leaders of world politics such as Mr. Churchill was the Prime Minister of England at that point of time, have nowadays begun to think of a humane world, trying to get rid of the terrible national frenzy of hate. The frenzy of hatred is another side of the frenzy of love. The frenzy of love of Hitler's own countrymen has produced the concomitant frenzy of hatred for others. And the present war is a result of such dual side of frenzy called love and hatred. So when we wish to get rid of the frenzy of hate, we must be prepared to get rid of the frenzy of the so-called love. This position of equilibrium, free from love and hatred, is attained only when men are sufficiently educated. Until men were educated to see the soul within the body, the dual frenzy of love and hate would continue and a humane world would not be possible. This introspection, Abhay concluded, is easily attained by service of Godhead. So, Mr. Churchill's humane world implies that we must go back to Godhead. Mr. Bernard Shaw's wishful desire. Mr. Bernard Shaw has congratulated Mahatma Gandhi on the occasion's later 76th birthday in the following words. I can only wish this were Mr. Gandhi's 35th birthday instead of his 76th. We heartily join Mr. Shaw in his attempt to subtract 41 years from the present age of Mahatma Gandhi. But death does not respect our wishful desire. Neither Mr. Shaw nor Mahatma Gandhi nor any other great personality had ever been able to solve the problem of death. The leaders of nations have opened many factories for manufacturing weapons for the art of killing, but none has opened a factory to manufacture weapons for protecting man from the cruel hand of death. Although our wishful desire is always not to die. How do you do this? You read and there's questions, or? Oh, okay. I can speak. Men were preoccupied with the problem of how to get bread. Although this problem was actually solved by nature, man should try to solve the problem of death. Bhagavad Gita tells that the problem of death can be solved. Although death is everywhere in the material world, one who attains to me, says Krishna, never has to take his birth again in the material world. There is a spiritual world, non-destructible, and one who goes there does not come back to the region of death. Why should the leaders of nations cling to a planet of their birth where death is inevitable? Abhay concluded, we wish that in their ripe old age, Mr. Shaw and Mahatma Gandhi will make combined effort to educate men to learn how to go back to home, back to Godhead. After 2 issues of Back to Godhead, Abhay had to stop. Printing was costly, but he kept writing regularly, working at the Gita Upanishad, turning out new articles and philosophical purports on the scriptures. Even in the same book in which he wrote his pharmaceutical formulas. So we can see here that His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada is not the kind of person, Shri Shri Radha Madhava, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. He's not a kind of person who gives up easily. He was rejected, his request for paper was rejected twice. But Srila Prabhupada wrote one more letter in which he makes a very fervent plea that paper should be granted to him because he was following the instruction of his Guru. I am following the instruction of my Guru, so you better give me paper, I want it. I beg to submit that under the instruction of His Divine Grace, Sri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, the spiritual head of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, I had to start paper under the caption, Back to Godhead. So Prabhupada says that he says that in that booklet you shall find strong world opinions in favor of such a movement to bring back the world into sanity. I hope you will kindly go through the paper by making some time, and I may draw your attention especially to the introductory portion. And Prabhupada says that what has the modern day management achieved? They are only manufacturing scarcities. Very powerfully he mentions. And then he says in the Britain also there's some movement, the moral rearmament movement. And how the British government has immensely supported the moral rearmament movement without consideration of the scarcity of paper. So even if it is just one page, Srila Prabhupada is requesting that kindly allot paper for the sake of humanity and Godhead. So finally when Prabhupada gets allotted the required quantum of paper, he writes, thanks to the Government of India. And then he continues to print. So it's interesting to see that Prabhupada's analysis of these talks between Jinnah and Mahatma Gandhi. Prabhupada says Jinnah and Mahatma Gandhi are talking to each other because they want to stop the traditional kind of mood of rivalry between Hindus and Muslims. Hoping that these talks will build some kind of a reconciliation between the two religions. But Prabhupada points out the folly, the fallacy of this argument by saying that if you look at this, the war that is going on in Europe, at that time there was a Second World War, it was between Christians and Christians. Prabhupada is pointing out that this type of understanding or presumption that wars will happen only between Hindus and Muslims or Muslims and Christians or something like that may actually be false. Because today also you can see how starkly true this statement is, because there are so many wars that are happening. Take for instance the one between Russia and Ukraine. They were together at one point of time. They were part of the same country. They have the same religion, same cultural background. Similar, not exactly the same. But they are fighting a fierce war for almost a year now. A very fierce battle is going on. So it is clear that it is not... sometimes, of course, religion contributes to war. Like maybe the war between India and Pakistan, religion could be a factor. But that may not be the factor always. So Prabhupada is very powerfully and very boldly presenting the Vedic perspective. He says that don't look at war as something that happens between two religions. He says that war is something that happens between two groups of ignorant people. Completely ignorant people. That's how wars happen. Not necessarily by the people belonging to different castes. So Prabhupada is saying, so there is the need for spiritually educating so that we don't fight wars on the basis of ignorance. So Prabhupada is writing very boldly, and Prabhupada Prabhupada is also making this prediction. Fighting will go on between Hindu, Mohammedan, Hindu and Hindus, Mohammedan and Mohammedan, Christians and Christians, Buddhists and Buddhists, till the day of annihilation, as long as there was contaminated self-interest of self-gratification. There would be fighting between brother and brother, father and son, nation and nation. Real unity would stand only on a plane of transcendental service to the Supreme. So, here Prabhupada cited Bhagavad Gita's definition of Mahatma, one who concentrates his attention on the service of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. And he requested Mahatma Gandhi to adhere to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and preach its message of surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this way, Mahatma Gandhi, through his influential position in the world, could bring about universal relief simply by preaching the message of Bhagavad Gita. So here Prabhupada is saying that Mahatma Gandhi has to think what is the real meaning of the word Mahatma, and how it is the best thing to do is utilize his popularity and preach the Bhagavad Gita. The next article which is quoted here is Churchill's Humane World. It's also very interesting because Prabhupada actually builds a satire. The frenzy of love of Hitler's own countrymen has produced a concomitant frenzy of hatred for others. So when one thing is promoted, automatically the other thing will grow. So when they are told that they have to passionately love their kingdom and their race and their clan and their nation, that will also sometimes result in hatred for others. One extremity attracts the other extremity as well. So there will be hatred for others. So Prabhupada is writing about Winston Churchill's, what is that? Humane World. Again, Prabhupada is saying it's this position of equilibrium free from love and hatred is attained only when men are sufficiently educated. Until men are educated to see soul within the body, the dual frenzy of love and hate would continue. So, Mr. Churchill's Human World implies that we must go back to Godhead. So here again Prabhupada is making a satire on Winston Churchill's comment about a human world. Prabhupada says, how is that possible? There will be humane world. As long as somebody is preaching that he should sacrifice everything for his nation, for his country, automatically when we preach that so heavily, then there will be hatred for other countries. So Prabhupada is very intelligently commenting on the most prominent people of those days, Mahatma Gandhi, Winston Churchill, Bernard Shaw, because Prabhupada knows that when we comment on some people of that stature, automatically it attracts attention of everybody. Oh, what is it that we have to say about someone like Winston Churchill? It attracts everybody's attention. Automatically it attracts. So that way Prabhupada was able to present the Vedic perspective, the Bhagavad Gita perspective. So it means Prabhupada was an innovative, very daring, was a very persistent preacher, very confident also. And Prabhupada knew the power of commenting or presenting the Vedic perspective on current affairs. That means on whatever is happening currently in the world. Let's say the Russian-Ukraine war, the financial crisis in Lanka, or for that matter, Pakistan. So Prabhupada would have expected that we present the Vedic perspective on different crises that are happening in this world. The biggest crisis happening in this world. Prabhupada commented on the Second World War. Say, for example, Prabhupada would have wanted that we write about what is the origin, what is contributed to the financial crisis of our neighboring countries. And Prabhupada would have wanted us to say that all this is probably can be attributed to greed and presenting the Vedic perspective of Daivi Varnashrama society, or kings being advised by a Brahminical council. One would have expected that. So it is seen that large numbers of people, countries suffer because of the stupidity of their rulers. Ignorance and stupidity and arrogance of their rulers. Huge blunders are committed. Sometimes selfish needs also of the rulers, or who are ruling without the advice of a Brahminical council. So that way Prabhupada would have said that we need to promote, establish Brahminical, fearless people called the Brahmanas. And that is the objective of the ISKCON society, to make people, to build a, the class of men called the Brahmanas, who are like the head of the society. Kshatriyas are like the body, the arms and the body, arms basically. So what will happen if the arms are strong and the head is weak? So Prabhupada would have commented on, Prabhupada actually did comment on many leaders lacking spiritual value system. So what we can see from Prabhupada is that he has this uncanny ability to look at the world from the perspective of a Vedic, Acharya, from a Acharya, and comment on things that are happening. And try and bring the people back to the Vedic way of life. We can see that a similar attempt was done in the case of Dhritarashtra. He was also a very biased, very, we could say, weak leader. Weak because he had no morality, not because he was not physically strong. We call somebody weak because he has no morality. He was so obsessed with his love for his son that he sacrificed the future of the entire Kuru dynasty because of his love for his son, Duryodhana. So there were so many attempts made by so many people to educate him, to tell him, to warn him also, not just guide him. And many people, Vidura, Maitreya, Krishna himself, comes Vyasadeva, they all come and warn him, saying, you have taken and chosen a path of self-destruction because of your stupidity and attachment for your son. And they advise him, just as Prabhupada is trying to advise the rulers of his time and date, trying to advise them, saying that this world has to be managed in a particular way, in a God-given particular way. Otherwise it will be disastrous. So they tried their best to educate, just as much as Prabhupada is trying to educate people, the rulers of this age. They tried to tell Dhritarashtra that he has chosen a path of self-destruction. And this could be the end of the entire Kuru dynasty. Everybody tries to educate. And finally, when Vidura gives up, because Vidura tells Dhritarashtra that one single biggest cause of this war that is inevitable, that is going to happen, which will destroy your race, is your attachment for Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra can't take it anymore. Everybody is advising him. Everybody. Vyasa, Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, Vidura, everybody is advising him. Krishna. So he kind of covers his ears and shows his displeasure to Vidura and tells Vidura that, to me it appears like you're taking the side of the enemy. You're taking the side of the enemy. So I disown you now. Like that. Because he can't take it anymore. He's not able to take that someone is pointing out his folly. So he tells, if you want, you stay, otherwise you go. I'm disowning you. I don't need your advice anymore. Like that he says. And poor Vidura then is heard saying, whatever little hope was there that this Kuru dynasty would survive is now completely gone. It's gone, finished. And he becomes terribly disappointed with the conduct of Dhritarashtra. But he says, what can we do? Fate, Kala, sometimes acts in its own inevitable way. But Srila Prabhupada is also trying his best to educate everybody, not just the kings, the rulers. But Prabhupada had that faith that if the kings, the rulers, the intellectual class change, they can bring about big change in the society. Prabhupada always had that hope that they can bring about big change. Apparently, Prabhupada has also said that among the leaders, even if 1 in 100 becomes a devotee, big changes can happen in this world. Which is why wherever Prabhupada went, he would meet the leaders, the cardinals, the bishops, the politicians, the professors, the scientists. So Prabhupada was a very, very, very intelligent, very determined preacher, tirelessly presenting the Vedic philosophy to all types of audiences. And specifically he chose audiences where successful people, big people, scientists and priests and professors and like that, whenever he got a chance to do that. On his own, Prabhupada tried and went and met Lal Bahadur Shastri. He met Indira Gandhi. And whenever he came to India, he would meet the governors, the chief ministers. When he came to Hyderabad, he met Channa Reddy, Jalagam Vengal Rao. Those days they were big people, very, very big people. He met different types of leaders wherever he went in his attempt to present the Vedic philosophy. Because it is considered that if the leaders change, they can bring about a huge change in the society. So Prabhupada was trying. So if there's something we can learn about Prabhupada's persistence, Srila Prabhupada's very clear-cut strategy of reaching out to the leaders. Prabhupada knew the power and potency of the printed word, which is why he insisted on writing the Back to God magazine. He insisted on writing. In fact, that is why even Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he was among the first to write Sajjana Toshani. So this tradition of writing has been strongly preserved in our parampara. The written word is so powerful compared to the spoken word. Prabhupada said that has a much more deeper, profound impact in the society. Scholarly produced books, which are very high standard, they have a huge impact on the society. So, whether it's about Krishna, whether it's about philosophy, whether it is about pastimes of the Lord, whether it is about Bhagavad Gita, the printed book, the printed word is very powerful. It has a long-standing impact. You can see that, maybe the Bible was there. The Christianity spread also on the back of the Bible, you could say. So Bible was their book that they published and then they distributed at one point of time very widely. And people read the Bible and they had a problem reading the scriptures, Vedic scriptures, because Vedic scriptures tend to be in Sanskrit. And because this tradition of studying Sanskrit was lost, so people became distanced from our own Vedic literature. And at that point of time, people like Prabhupada did not receive sufficient encouragement because it was British rule and then later on so-called secularism. So Prabhupada didn't receive encouragement and Christianity became some kind of a state-sponsored religion. So a lot of social changes, demographic changes happened in India also. But we're still a Hindu majority nation, but nobody really knows what it means to be a Hindu. Nobody knows what it means to follow Sanatana Dharma also. Everybody has his or her own conception. So Prabhupada didn't like this, he would call it the wishy-washy philosophy. Nobody knows actually what is the right thing to do. Who is Krishna? Does he exist? Or is he imagination? So Prabhupada would point out that the British had that vested interest in destroying our faith, so that we take to Christianity or something else and give up our own faith. So but today we see in the world that the world is by and large faithless. Just reading some statistic recently which said that in the 60s, more than 70% or 80% of the American population believed in the existence of God, reincarnation, soul, karma, sin, etc. But now that has come down to less than 40%. And maybe 40% of them believe that there is no religion, no God. So it's becoming a very, very dangerous atheistic society. The Prabhupada predicted all of it. And then said that the only hope really is the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and the books that he wrote, which is why he insisted that his books should be very widely distributed, because these printed books can create a revolution of faith. A revolution of faith once again in this society, the printed books. Otherwise we will become a completely atheistic society. An atheistic society is very dangerous because they neither believe in God, nor morality, nor karma, nor existence of soul. See, it would become a very, hedonistic society where everybody's only objective will be sense gratification. And when everybody's objective is only sense gratification, inevitably it will lead to war. Because everybody wants the best of resources, best of facilities, best of everything, and that would lead to war. They would compete for resources. So Prabhupada said that everything in this world, everything in this world is provided by God. Prabhupada even said, who are you to stop me from entering United States of America? It's not your land, it's God's land. What is this immigration passport business? Prabhupada had said that. He said he didn't like this whole idea that I can be restricted from going anywhere in this world, and somebody can reject me if I want to go to America or Europe or some country. He said, it's not your land. At one point of time it was all one kingdom, one nation, one kingdom, one king. So Prabhupada didn't like many of these. And then he would sarcastically point out at United Nations and say, what have they achieved? When they began, there were maybe 90 countries, and now there are 140 countries. So more flags have been coming up, which means more conflict, more divisions, more new countries, more wars, like that. That is what seems to be happening, because it's a bunch of people who claim to be leaders who are without direction. So Prabhupada was so determined to create the Brahminical class, and then he knew that Brahminical class is the actual solution for all problems of this society. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
Guruji, we heard that reading is often more convincing. Like
Reading is?
more convincing. And but in previous ages, it was Shruti Dhar. Everyone used to hear in Shruti. So how is reading more powerful than hearing? I was a little confused.
I don't know if we can differentiate so much between reading and hearing. But the fact is that we need the written book more now than in the previous ages, because we don't have the same type of memory that the people of the previous ages had. We don't have. Hence we need to be supported by a book. But in the previous ages, they were blessed with more memory, more sattva guna, more peaceful mind. They were not so as disturbed as the people of this age are. They were not subjected to so much pressure and anxiety and stress and disease and like that. So they were more sattvic, they were more satisfied. People were just kind of satisfied leading simple lives in villages and like that. But today nobody is allowed to live peacefully. So they are very constantly agitated, hence we need a book. But otherwise, I don't think scripturally we differentiate between reading and hearing. We don't. I don't see that kind of a separation. Reading is also, Prabhupada says, one type of Shravanam. Reading is also Shravanam. But yeah, we need a book. Because we're not like, we listen once to the Guru and then you can capture it in your memory. We're not like that. We are at a disadvantage compared to the people of the previous ages. I was in a program in Bangalore about 2 weeks back. It was one of those Grahastha programs. So a lot of kids. So I gave a class, and at the end of the class, so there were some newcomers also. We did a raising their hands and people saying, how did you benefit by regularly, systematically chanting? So there was one 8-year-old kid who raised his hand, and I thought, 8-year-old kid. So there were so many other grown-ups also. So I was asking different people to speak. Then finally people pointed out. So I said, okay, what do you have to say about chanting regularly? He's 8 years old. His parents were also there. He said, I like chanting because it helps me manage my stress. He's 8 years old. I mean, when I was 8, I don't think I even knew the meaning of that word stress. He said, it helps me manage my stress. So, because I'm chanting regularly, I don't feel so stressed out when I go to school or like that, he said. He explained, he said, when I go to school, I don't feel so stressed out. And after some time, I mean, everybody was looking at him in disbelief. Here's this guy, 8-year-old, speaking like this. So, after some time, another little girl raised her hand. She was 5-year-old, little kutty girl, this size girl. She raised her hand. So by the time I got really curious, I said, okay, what do you have to say about chanting? 5-year-old girl who's barely learned how to talk properly, maybe a year back or something, going to school. She said, believe me, she said this. She said, I like chanting because it helps me manage my anger. Then I asked her, so what do you do when you become angry? She said, I close my eyes and loudly chant Hare Krishna Mantra 2 times or 3 times, and then I can become peaceful and less angry. It helps me manage my anger. 5-year-old kid. Imagine the kind of cruelty we are subjecting our children to. Cruelty and, anxiety, stress. and very artificially built up standards of competition, and we are being very cruel with our children. That girl was about this size. So we need a written book. But otherwise there's no difference between reading and hearing. Both are Shravanam. Any other question? Yes? Huh?
Was again restarted when Prabhupada went to US, right?
Yes, correct.
So for a long time, again, Prabhupada has ever attempted in between any time to restart this BTG, because Prabhupada was focusing on writing Bhagavatam when he was in Vrindavan. So during that time, has he ever attempted to make has he ever made an attempt to write again BTG?
I don't know, I think it was at irregular intervals BTG was published all the way up to mid-50s or something. There are random, irregularly produced magazine. When Srila Prabhupada used to be in Vrindavan and he would go to Delhi and publish this. Yes, it was restarted in the late 60s or something, or maybe 70s, early 70s, when Prabhupada established ISKCON in the West. There is some library that we have in Calcutta or something which has preserved all possible copies of the BTG magazine that they could retrieve. Though I'm talking about the ones before ISKCON was established. To my knowledge, it comes up to the 50s. I don't know exactly. But yes, Prabhupada's focus shifted from magazine to translating the books, because I think he found it of too much of an endeavor to go to Delhi and sit there and get this printed and published, editing it and composing it and so on. He focused on generating, because by that time he was more fixated upon the idea of wanting to go to the West. And he knew that he will be respected if he is an author of scholarly books once he goes to the West. He is an author of this book called Srimad Bhagavatam, Volume 1, 2, whatever, Bhagavad Gita. He wanted that. So Prabhupada focused on translations of the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, because that was a part of his strategy to prepare himself to go to the West. Guru Patit Pavan Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Radha Madhav Jagannath Baladev Subhadramai, Shri Shri Gaur Nithai ki, ISKCON Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nithai Gaur Premanande.
His Grace Varada